The sharp crack of rifle fire echoed across the windswept ranges of Fort Meridian at dawn, punctuated by the rhythmic thud of combat boots on gravel as Alpha Company assembled for their monthly marksmanship evaluation. The morning mist clung to the mountain peak surrounding the training facility, creating an almost ethereal backdrop for what would become the most talked-about shooting demonstration in military history. Staff Sergeant Derek Hawthorne would later claim he never saw it coming, but by sunset, he'd witness a woman hit 237 consecutive targets at an impossible 5,800-meter range, shattering every assumption he'd ever made about gender and marksmanship. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The crisp October air carried the familiar scent of gun oil and fresh coffee as soldiers filed into the range briefing area. Fort Meridian, nestled in the Colorado Rockies, had been home to the Army's Advanced Marksmanship Training Center for over 3 decades. Its reputation for producing the military's finest shooters was legendary, and the standards were unforgiving. Every month, soldiers from across the country arrived to test their skills against some of the most challenging shooting courses in the world. Private First Class Jade Reeves sat quietly in the back row of the briefing room, her regulation as CU. Uniform perfectly pressed, her auburn hair pulled back in a regulation bun. At 26 years old, she carried herself with the measured composure of someone accustomed to avoiding attention. Her personnel file listed her military occupational specialty as 9-2 Automated Logistical Specialist. To everyone at Fort Meridian, she was simply another supply clerk who'd been assigned to support the training operations. Staff Sergeant Hawthorne strode to the front of the briefing room with the swagger of a man who'd built his reputation on the shooting range. At 34, he'd spent 12 years in the Army, with tours in Afghanistan and Iraq that had earned him combat infantry badge and the respect that came with proven battlefield experience. His marksmanship scores were consistently in the top 5% of all Army shooters, and he wore that achievement like armor against any challenge to his authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hawthorne announced, his voice carrying the kind of casual confidence that came from years of being the best shooter in most rooms he entered. "Today we're conducting qualification shoots at multiple distances. We'll start at 300 meters and work our way out to 1,200 meters for those who can handle the challenge." He paused, scanning the assembled soldiers with the practiced eye of an instructor who'd seen thousands of wannabe marksmen come and go. "I'll be honest with you. Long-range precision shooting isn't for everyone. It requires steady nerves, perfect breathing control, and the kind of focus that most people simply can't maintain under pressure." Private Chun looked around nervously. This was his first time at Fort Meridian, and the legendary difficulty of the courses was already making him question whether he belonged there. Sergeant Williams nodded confidently. She'd been preparing for this evaluation for months and felt ready for the challenge. "Now," Hawthorne continued, his tone shifting slightly as his gaze swept across the handful of female soldiers in the group, "I want to set realistic expectations. Precision marksmanship, especially at extended ranges, requires certain physical and mental attributes that not everyone possesses equally." The statement hung in the air with the weight of unspoken implications. Several male soldiers nodded in agreement, while the women in the room felt the familiar sting of assumptions being made about their capabilities based on their gender. Jade remained perfectly still, her expression neutral, but those who knew what to look for might have noticed the subtle shift in her posture. Her shoulders squared almost imperceptibly, and her hands, resting casually on her knees, formed loose fists. It was the kind of controlled response that came from years of hearing similar comments and choosing when to respond. The equipment we'll be using today includes the M24 sniper weapon system for distances up to 800 meters, and for those qualified on the platform, we have the M107 Barrett. .50 caliber available for shots beyond 1,000 meters, Hawthorne explained. Walking over to the weapon displays that had been arranged for demonstration, he picked up the massive Barrett rifle with practiced ease, its 29-pound weight seeming negligible in his experienced hands. This weapon system is capable of accurate fire out to 2,000 meters in the right conditions. But I'll tell you right now, managing the recoil and maintaining accuracy at those distances requires significant upper body strength and experience that takes years to develop. His eyes found the female soldiers again, and his smile carried just enough condescension to be insulting without being overtly offensive. That's not a criticism, just a biological reality. Different people have different strengths, and there's no shame in recognizing limitations. Corporal Matthews, a seasoned infantryman with multiple combat deployments, raised his hand. Sergeant Hawthorne, what's the longest confirmed kill shot ever recorded with the Barrett system? Hawthorne's expression brightened at the opportunity to display his knowledge. Excellent question, Matthews. The current record stands at 3,540 meters, achieved by a Canadian sniper in Afghanistan. Absolutely incredible shooting, requiring perfect conditions, exceptional equipment, and skills that maybe 1 in 10,000 soldiers could ever hope to develop. He set the Barrett back on its display stand with reverent care. That kind of precision represents the absolute pinnacle of marksmanship achievement. We're talking about calculations involving wind speed, air density, temperature, humidity, Coriolis effect, and a dozen other variables that most people couldn't even understand, let alone account for in real time. Private First Class Rodriguez leaned forward with obvious interest. Sergeant, have you ever attempted shots at those kinds of distances? I've successfully engaged targets out to 2,200 meters under controlled conditions, Hawthorne replied with obvious pride. It's a different world entirely from standard infantry marksmanship. The margin for error becomes essentially zero, and every aspect of your technique has to be absolutely perfect. Throughout this exchange, Jade continued to listen with the same neutral expression she'd maintained since entering the briefing room. But careful observers might have noticed her eyes tracking every detail of the weapon systems being discussed, and the way she seemed to be mentally cataloging the specifications and capabilities being described. The bottom line, Hawthorne concluded, returning to his position at the front of the room, is that today's evaluation will separate those who can talk about shooting from those who can actually perform when it matters. We'll see who has the natural ability and dedication required for precision marksmanship. His gaze lingered on the female soldiers once more, the implication clear that he didn't expect them to be in the latter category. Remember, there's no shame in discovering that your talents lie in other areas of military service. The Army needs specialists in every field, and support roles are just as important as combat positions. The condescension was subtle but unmistakable, delivered with the kind of smile that suggested he was doing everyone a favor by managing their expectations. Several of the women in the room exchanged glances that mixed frustration with determination. As the briefing concluded and soldiers began preparing to move to the firing ranges, Jade gathered her gear with the same quiet efficiency she brought to every task. Her movement was economical and precise, each action serving a specific purpose without wasted motion. The practiced way she handled her equipment suggested familiarity that went beyond basic military training, but in the bustle of preparation, these details went largely unnoticed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The stage was set for a day that would challenge every assumption about capability, gender, and the nature of true expertise. What none of them knew was that they were about to witness a demonstration of marksmanship that would redefine their understanding of what was possible when skill met opportunity under the perfect conditions for revelation. The morning sun climbed. Higher over Fort Meridian, as Alpha Company moved from the briefing room to Range 7, the facility's premier long-distance shooting course. The range stretched across a natural valley, with target arrays positioned at precisely measured intervals from 300 meters out to the maximum, 1,200-meter limit that few soldiers ever attempted. The Rocky Mountain backdrop provided a stunning setting, but the beauty was lost on most participants who were focused on the technical challenge ahead. Staff Sergeant Hawthorne led the group with the confident stride of someone completely comfortable in his element. Behind him, 23 soldiers carried their assigned weapons and gear, the metallic clinks of equipment creating a steady rhythm as they walked. The crisp mountain air carried conversations about wind conditions, elevation adjustments, and nervous jokes about missing targets that would become permanently recorded in their service records. Jade Reeves walked near the back of the formation, her M4 carbine slung across her shoulder in perfect regulation fashion. As a supply specialist, she'd been issued standard infantry equipment for the evaluation, nothing that would suggest any special qualifications or advanced training. Her gear was clean and properly maintained, but unremarkable, exactly what anyone would expect from a logistical support soldier. Attending a routine marksmanship qualification. Private Chun fell into step beside her, his nervousness evident in the way he kept adjusting his rifle sling and checking his ammunition pouches. "First time at Meridian?" he asked quietly, clearly seeking some reassurance from a fellow newcomer. "Yes," Jade replied simply, her voice carrying no particular emotion. "Should be educational." Chun nodded eagerly. "I've been practicing for months, but hearing Sergeant Hawthorne talk about those extreme distances. I mean, 2,200 meters? I can barely hit consistently at 500. Distance shooting requires patience and fundamentals," Jade said with the kind of casual authority that suggested practical experience. "Most people overcomplicate it." Before Chun could ask what she meant, they reached the range complex where Range Safety Officer Captain Torres was conducting the mandatory safety briefing. The protocols were standard but critical, with multiple shooters engaging targets at various distances simultaneously. Coordination and communication were essential to prevent accidents. "Shooters will rotate through 4 stations," Captain Torres announced, referring to a large diagram showing the range layout. Station Alpha covers 300 and 500 meters with M4 carbines. Station Bravo handles 600 and 800 meters with M24 sniper systems. Station Charlie is reserved for 1,000-meter shots with the Barrett .50 caliber, but only soldiers with documented sniper training will be cleared for that distance. Hawthorne stepped forward to add his own commentary. "And Station Delta," he said with obvious pride, "is our 1,200-meter extreme range position. I'll personally supervise anyone who thinks they're ready for that challenge. Though I expect we'll have very few takers today." His eyes swept the group again, lingering on the female soldiers with the same patronizing expression he'd worn during the briefing. "Ladies, I'd recommend focusing on the closer distances where you're more likely to achieve qualifying scores. No point in attempting shots that are beyond your current skill level." The comment was delivered with a smile, but the condescension was unmistakable. Sergeant Williams felt her jaw tighten at the assumption that her gender automatically limited her shooting ability. She'd been qualifying expert with the M4 for 3 years and had no intention of limiting herself based on Hawthorne's prejudices. "Sergeant Hawthorne," Williams said, her voice carefully controlled, "the qualification standards don't specify different requirements based on gender. Are you suggesting the Army's standards are incorrect?" Hawthorne's smile became more pronounced, the kind of expression that suggested he was dealing with someone who didn't understand reality. "Not at all, Williams. The standards are what they are. I'm simply sharing the wisdom that comes from 12 years of experience and thousands of hours on shooting ranges. Some people have natural advantages in precision marksmanship, and denying that fact doesn't help anyone. The tension in the group was becoming palpable. Several male soldiers nodded in agreement with Hawthorne's assessment, while others looked uncomfortable with the obvious gender-based assumptions being made. The female soldiers present, Williams, Corporal Janet Stone, and Private Lisa Chang, all felt the familiar frustration of having their capabilities questioned before they'd even had a chance to demonstrate them. Natural advantages, Williams repeated, her tone carrying just enough edge to make clear she wasn't backing down. Such as upper body strength for recoil management, particularly with the Barrett system. Hawthorne replied, apparently happy to elaborate on his theory. Bone density differences that affect stability under stress. Even neurological factors that influence hand-eye coordination and spatial reasoning. These aren't controversial statements. They're documented physiological differences. Corporal Matthews, who had asked about record distances during the briefing, jumped in to support his sergeant. I mean, there's a reason why all the elite military snipers are men. It's not discrimination, it's just biology. Actually, Jade said quietly, speaking for the first time since arriving at the range, that's not entirely accurate. The comment was delivered so softly that several soldiers had to strain to hear it. But something in her tone made everyone pay attention. Hawthorne turned toward her with raised eyebrows, clearly surprised that a supply clerk would contradict his assessment. I'm sorry, Private. Hawthorne paused, realizing he didn't know her name despite her being part of the evaluation group. Reeves, Jade replied simply. Private Reeves, Hawthorne continued, his tone shifting to the kind of patient condescension reserved for correcting someone who was obviously out of their depth. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but precision marksmanship at extended ranges is a highly specialized skill set. Perhaps you should focus on achieving basic qualification scores before worrying about the finer points of sniper operations. The dismissal was complete and public, delivered in front of 22 other soldiers who were now watching the exchange with obvious interest. Several of the male soldiers chuckled, apparently finding humor in a supply clerk attempting to challenge their sergeant's expertise. Jade's expression remained neutral, but those with experience reading people might have noticed the subtle shift in her posture. Her weight settled more evenly on both feet, and her hands relaxed at her sides in the way that suggested someone preparing for action rather than backing down from confrontation. I was simply noting, Jade said, her voice carrying the same quiet authority she'd used when talking to Chun, that several military snipers have been women, and some of the longest recorded shots in military history were made by female shooters. Ludmila Pavlichenko had 309 confirmed kills. Rosa Shanina could engage multiple targets in rapid succession at ranges exceeding 800 meters. The historical references were delivered with casual precision, as if she were reciting commonly known facts rather than demonstrating detailed knowledge of sniper operations. The specificity of the information was striking, particularly coming from someone whose job supposedly involved managing supply inventories rather than studying military marksmanship. Hawthorne's confident expression faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. Those are historical examples from very different military contexts, he said dismissively. Modern precision shooting requires far more sophisticated equipment and training than what was available during World War II. The fundamentals remain the same, Jade replied. Breathing control, natural point of aim, trigger discipline, environmental awareness. Equipment enhances capability, but marksmanship is still primarily about mental discipline and consistent execution of proper technique. The statement was delivered with such matter-of-fact authority that several soldiers found themselves nodding before they realized they were agreeing with the supply clerk's analysis of advanced shooting techniques. Hawthorne clearly recognized that he was losing control of the narrative. Well, he said, his tone becoming more sharp, since Private Reeves seems to have such strong opinions about precision marksmanship. Perhaps she'd like to demonstrate her expertise. We can start her at the 300-meter line and see how her theoretical knowledge translates into practical performance. The challenge was delivered with obvious malicious intent, designed to publicly embarrass someone who had dared to question his authority. Around the range, soldiers began gathering to watch what promised to be an entertaining demonstration of the difference between talking and performing. Jade looked at Hawthorne for a long moment, her green eyes steady and unblinking. When she spoke, her voice carried a quality that made everyone lean in to listen. "Sergeant Hawthorne," she said quietly, "would you be willing to make that evaluation more interesting?" The question hung in the morning air like a challenge, and suddenly everyone on Range 7 understood that they were about to witness something far more significant than a routine marksmanship qualification. The silence that followed Jade's question stretched across Range 7 like a held breath. Staff Sergeant Hawthorne's confident expression shifted as he processed what had just happened. A supply clerk had not only challenged his assessment of female marksmanship capabilities, but had now suggested turning their confrontation into something more formal. The other soldiers formed a loose semicircle around them, sensing that the routine qualification exercise was evolving into something unprecedented. More interesting, how, exactly? Hawthorne asked, his tone carrying a mixture of amusement and irritation. He crossed his arms over his chest, the gesture emphasizing the combat patches and marksmanship badges that decorated his uniform. Everything about his posture suggested a man who had never lost a shooting competition and couldn't imagine starting now. Jade's expression remained perfectly calm, but Master Sergeant Patricia Cruz, who had been observing the interaction from the range control tower, noticed something that made her reach for her binoculars. Cruz had spent 15 years in the Army, including 3 tours as a sniper instructor, and she recognized the kind of stillness that preceded exceptional performance. "A demonstration," Jade replied simply. "You've suggested that women lack the natural advantages for precision shooting. I'd like to test that theory under conditions that would provide definitive results." Private Chun stepped closer, fascinated despite his nervousness. He'd never seen anyone speak to a staff sergeant with such quiet confidence, particularly not a soldier who supposedly worked in supply logistics. The conversation was taking on an almost ceremonial quality, as if they were witnessing the opening moves of a formal duel. Corporal Stone, one of the female soldiers who had been subjected to Hawthorne's earlier condescension, felt a mixture of excitement and concern. Part of her was thrilled to see someone challenging the sergeant's assumptions, but another part worried that a public failure would only reinforce the stereotypes they all faced. "Private Reeves," Captain Torres interjected, walking over from the safety briefing area where he'd been observing the growing commotion. "What exactly are you proposing?" Torres had supervised thousands of qualification shoots during his career, and he'd learned to recognize when standard procedures were about to be disrupted by extraordinary circumstances. The body language of everyone involved suggested that whatever was developing would be remembered long after the day's scores were recorded. Jade turned to face the captain with the same measured composure she'd shown throughout the confrontation. "Sir, I'd like to request permission to demonstrate marksmanship capabilities at extended range," with Sergeant Hawthorne observing and validating the results. "Extended range meaning what distance?" Torres asked, though something in his tone suggested he suspected the answer would be significant. "Whatever distance Sergeant Hawthorne considers appropriate for testing the limits of female shooting capability," Jade replied. The diplomatic phrasing put the challenge back in Hawthorne's court while avoiding any appearance of insubordination. Hawthorne's eyes narrowed as he considered the situation. He was being maneuvered into a position where refusing the challenge would suggest uncertainty about his own abilities, but accepting it meant potentially being shown up by a supply clerk in front of his students. His reputation as the range's premier instructor was built on consistent superiority, not gracious losses to unexpected challengers. "Private Reeves," Hawthorne said slowly, "precision shooting at extreme distances requires extensive training on specific weapon systems. You're qualified on the M4 carbine for basic infantry requirements. The Barrett .50 caliber system we use for long-range work requires specialized instruction and significant experience to operate safely, let alone accurately." It was a reasonable objection, technically correct and professionally stated, but everyone present could hear the underlying assumption that a female supply soldier couldn't possibly have the background necessary for advanced marksmanship. Master Sergeant Cruz descended from the control tower, her curiosity now fully engaged. She'd been watching Jade's posture and movement patterns throughout the conversation, and something about the woman's bearing suggested military experience that went beyond basic training and supply school. "What's your background with precision shooting, Private Reeves?" Cruz asked, her tone neutral but professionally interested. As the senior enlisted soldier present, her question carried weight that couldn't be easily dismissed. Jade looked at Cruz for a moment before answering, and those watching carefully might have noticed a subtle shift in her demeanor. The casual deflection she'd been using with Hawthorne was replaced by the kind of direct communication that occurred between professionals who understood each other's capabilities. "I have some experience with various weapon systems, Master Sergeant," Jade replied. "Enough to be confident in my ability to demonstrate safe and accurate shooting at whatever distance seems appropriate for this evaluation." The phrasing was carefully neutral, providing information without revealing specifics. Cruz, however, heard something in the response that made her study Jade's uniform more carefully. The ribbons and badges were standard for a supply specialist with one deployment, nothing that would suggest advanced training or special qualifications. "Some experience," Hawthorne repeated, his tone making clear that he found the vague response inadequate. "Private Reeves, the Barrett system generates over 10,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. The recoil is substantial enough to injure inexperienced shooters, and the precision required for accuracy at 1,000+ meters takes years to develop. Some experience isn't sufficient for safe operation." Several soldiers nodded in agreement. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle was legendary for both its power and the skill required to use it effectively. Even experienced infantry soldiers approached the weapon with respect, understanding that poor technique could result in injury or embarrassing misses at the kinds of distances where ammunition costs became significant. Private Chun raised his hand tentatively. "Sergeant Hawthorne, what if Private Reeves demonstrated her capabilities at a shorter distance first? Maybe work up to the longer ranges if she shows appropriate skill." The suggestion was reasonable, offering a face-saving compromise that would allow everyone to assess capabilities without immediate commitment to extreme distances. But Jade's response surprised everyone. "That's not necessary," she said quietly. "If we're testing whether women can perform precision shooting at extended ranges, we should use a distance that provides a definitive answer, the confidence in." Her voice was absolute, carrying no trace of bravado or uncertainty. She spoke with the kind of matter-of-fact certainty that suggested she was discussing a routine task rather than attempting something that challenged conventional assumptions about gender and marksmanship. "Master." Sergeant Cruz made a decision that would change the trajectory of the entire day. "Captain Torres," she said formally, "I recommend we allow Private Reeves to demonstrate her capabilities under controlled conditions. If she's confident in her abilities and if proper safety protocols are maintained, there's no regulation preventing a qualified soldier from attempting extended-range shooting." Torres considered the request carefully. The situation had evolved beyond a simple qualification exercise into something that could have significant implications for unit morale and training protocols. On one hand, allowing an unproven soldier to attempt challenging shots could result in embarrassing failure and wasted resources. On the other hand, preventing the demonstration would suggest lack of confidence in the evaluation process itself. What distance are we talking about, specifically? Torres asked Hawthorne, recognizing that he was losing control of the situation. But unable to back down without losing face, made a decision that he would later regret. If Private Reeves wants to test the limits of female shooting capability, he said with obvious skepticism, she should attempt something that would definitively prove her point. The maximum effective range of the Barrett system under ideal conditions. Which is? Cruz prompted, though she already knew the answer. 2,000 meters, Hawthorne replied. At that distance, environmental factors, equipment limitations, and shooter's skill all combine to create a challenge that only the most exceptional marksman can meet consistently. The number hung in the air like a challenge to physics itself. 2,000 meters, over a mile of distance that would require accounting for wind drift, bullet drop, temperature variations, and atmospheric pressure changes that could affect projectile trajectory in unpredictable ways. Even experienced snipers considered such shots difficult under perfect conditions. Jade nodded as if she'd been expecting exactly that response. 2,000 meters would be acceptable, she said simply. Though if we're truly testing limits, the range could be extended further if conditions permit. The casual way she dismissed the challenge that Hawthorne had intended to be impossible sent a ripple of surprise through the assembled soldiers. Several exchanged glances that mixed disbelief with growing anticipation. Private Rodriguez leaned delays. Over to whisper to his teammate, either she's completely delusional, or we're about to see something incredible. Master Sergeant Cruz was thinking along similar lines, but her analysis was more systematic. Jade's confidence wasn't the manufactured bravado of someone trying to bluff their way through a situation. It was the quiet certainty of someone who had performed similar tasks before and understood exactly what they were capable of accomplishing. Private Reeves, Cruz said carefully, shooting at 2,000 meters requires extensive knowledge of ballistics, environmental conditions, and equipment capabilities. Are you prepared to demonstrate that knowledge as part of this evaluation? Yes, Master Sergeant, Jade replied without hesitation. The stage was set for a demonstration that would challenge every assumption about capability, training, and the relationship between apparent qualifications and actual performance. What none of them yet understood was that they were about to witness the emergence of skills that had been carefully hidden behind the unremarkable facade of a supply specialist who had chosen anonymity over recognition for reasons that would soon become clear to everyone. Present. The atmosphere on Range 7 had transformed from routine qualification exercise to something resembling a formal challenge match. Word of the confrontation between Staff Sergeant Hawthorne and the supply clerk had spread with the speed that only military gossip could achieve, and additional personnel began arriving from other training areas to witness what promised to be either a spectacular demonstration or an equally spectacular failure. Captain Torres found himself in the uncomfortable position of managing a situation that had escalated far beyond normal training protocols. The request for a 2,000-meter shot was extraordinary in itself, but the confidence with which Private Reeves had accepted the challenge suggested capabilities that her personnel file didn't reflect. As the range officer, he was responsible for both safety and the integrity of the evaluation process. Master Sergeant Cruz, Torres said, making the command decision, I want you to personally supervise the equipment preparation and safety protocols. If we're going to do this, it needs to be done correctly. Cruz nodded, understanding the implications. An improper shot at extreme distance could damage equipment, waste expensive ammunition, or worse, result in injury if safety procedures weren't meticulously followed. But more importantly, the demonstration would be scrutinized by everyone present. and any procedural irregularities would undermine the validity of whatever results they observed. Hawthorne watched the preparations with growing unease. What had started as a simple correction of an overconfident subordinate was evolving into a formal test of his own expertise and judgment. If Reeves somehow succeeded in making an accurate shot at 2,000 meters, it would fundamentally challenge his assumptions about gender and marksmanship. If she failed, as he expected, he would be vindicated, but would also bear responsibility for potentially humiliating a soldier in front of her peers. "Private Reeves," Hawthorne said, his tone shifting to what he probably intended as professional concern. "I want to make sure you understand the magnitude of what you're attempting. A 2,000-meter shot with the Barrett system requires precise calculation of multiple environmental variables: wind speed and direction at various elevations, air temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. Even the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation all influence projectile trajectory." He gestured toward the mountain valley that stretched before them, where heat shimmer was already beginning to distort the distant landscape. "The margin for error at that distance is essentially zero. A 1-degree miscalculation in windage translates to a miss of several feet. Even experienced snipers typically require multiple adjustment shots to achieve accuracy at extreme ranges." Jade listened to his explanation with the same neutral attention she'd shown throughout their interaction. When he finished, she nodded politely. "Those are all valid considerations, Sergeant. Environmental factors definitely need to be accounted for in any precision shooting calculation." Her response was professionally appropriate, but revealed nothing about her actual knowledge or experience. Several observers noted that she hadn't disagreed with any of Hawthorne's technical points, but neither had she seemed intimidated by the complexity he'd described. "Master." Sergeant Cruz returned from the equipment preparation area, carrying a rangefinder and atmospheric measurement device. "Private Reeves," she said, "before we proceed, I need to verify your familiarity with the Barrett system. Can you demonstrate proper weapon handling and safety procedures?" It was a reasonable request that would provide insight into Jade's actual experience level while ensuring everyone's safety. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle was an intimidating weapon system, weighing nearly 30 pounds and measuring over 4 feet in length. Soldiers without proper training could easily injure themselves or others simply by handling it incorrectly. Jade approached the weapon display with measured steps, her movement reflecting the careful precision that had characterized her behavior throughout the morning. When she reached the Barrett rifle, she paused for a moment, her eyes tracking along its length as if conducting a systematic inspection. What happened next surprised everyone present, including Master Sergeant Cruz, who had handled the same weapon thousands of times during her career as a sniper instructor. Jade's hands moved with absolute confidence and practiced efficiency, conducting a complete weapon inspection that demonstrated intimate familiarity with every component and control. She checked the chamber and magazine well with smooth motions that suggested muscle memory rather than recently learned procedures. Her finger traced the adjustment mechanisms for the scope with the kind of casual precision that indicated extensive experience. Most telling, she automatically verified the torque specifications on the scope mounting system, a detail that only advanced shooters would think to check. "Weapon is clear and properly configured," Jade announced, her voice carrying the formal tone that experienced soldiers used when reporting equipment status. "Scope is properly mounted and appears to be zeroed for the mounted system. Bipod legs are secure and adjustment mechanisms are functional." Cruz watched the inspection with growing professional interest. The speed and thoroughness of Jade's equipment check reflected training that went far beyond basic rifle handling. The systematic approach and technical vocabulary suggested someone with extensive experience in precision shooting operations. Private Chun, who had been watching the demonstration with fascination, leaned over to Rodriguez and whispered, She handles that thing like she's been using it for years. Rodriguez nodded, equally impressed by the casual competence they were witnessing. Look at her grip and stance. That's not someone who learned about rifles in supply school. Hawthorne observed Jade's weapon handling with conflicted emotions. Her obvious familiarity with the Barrett system challenged his assumption that she lacked relevant experience, but it also raised questions about why a supply specialist would have such advanced training. The contradiction between her military occupational specialty and her demonstrated knowledge was becoming too significant to ignore. Private Reeves, Hawthorne said carefully, your weapon handling suggests considerable experience with precision rifle systems. Can you explain where you acquired that training? The question was professionally stated, but everyone present understood its implications. Military training records were comprehensive, and advanced marksmanship instruction left clear documentation trails. If Jade had legitimate sniper training, it would be reflected in her personnel file and qualification records. Jade considered the question for several seconds before responding. I've had opportunities to work with various weapon systems during my military service, Sergeant. Some experiences aren't always reflected in standard training records. The answer was carefully phrased to provide information without revealing specifics. The reference to experiences not reflected in training records suggested either classified operations or informal instruction that wouldn't appear in official documentation. Either possibility indicated a background more complex than her current assignment suggested. Master Sergeant Cruz recognized the diplomatic language that soldiers with classified backgrounds often used when discussing their experience. The phrasing was too precise and practiced to be improvised, suggesting that Jade had answered similar questions before and had developed standard responses that provided truthful information without violating security protocols. Various weapon systems, Cruz repeated, using the same neutral tone that encouraged further elaboration without applying direct pressure. Including the Barrett .50 caliber specifically? Yes, Master Sergeant, Jade replied. I have experience with the M107 system in various configurations and operational environments. The confirmation was delivered with quiet confidence, but the reference to operational environments caught the attention of everyone with combat experience. Training ranges were one thing, but operational use implied actual missions, where precision shooting was required under real-world conditions with genuine consequences for failure. Captain Torres made a decision that reflected both his curiosity and his responsibility. As range safety officer, Private Reeves, given your apparent familiarity with the weapon system, I'm going to authorize this demonstration. However, I want Master Sergeant Cruz to personally supervise all aspects of the shot, including environmental calculations and safety protocols. Understood, sir, Jade replied. I'm ready to proceed whenever Master Sergeant Cruz determines conditions are appropriate. The formal acceptance of supervision was professionally correct, but Torres noticed that Jade didn't seem concerned about having her techniques observed by someone with extensive sniper instructor experience. Most soldiers attempting to perform beyond their documented qualifications would show some nervousness about expert scrutiny. Hawthorne found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. The demonstration he had proposed as a way to humble an overconfident subordinate was revealing capabilities that challenged his initial assessment. But backing down at this point would appear unprofessional and would undermine his authority in front of the soldiers he was responsible for training. Master Sergeant Cruz, Hawthorne said, reasserting his role in the proceedings, I recommend we establish clear criteria for success before the attempt. At 2,000 meters, what constitutes an acceptable shot group? Cruz considered the question carefully. Standard military accuracy requirements were designed for practical combat effectiveness rather than precision shooting competitions. At extreme distances, Even experienced snipers accepted larger margins of error due to the multiple variables affecting projectile flight. At 2,000 meters, under current atmospheric conditions, I would consider any shot within a 12-inch circle to be exceptionally accurate, Cruz replied. Most snipers would be satisfied with 18-inch groups at that distance. The standards she outlined were demanding but fair, reflecting the reality that extreme distance shooting required accounting for environmental factors that could affect accuracy regardless of shooter skill. Even the most advanced rifle systems had mechanical limitations that became significant at ranges beyond their optimal performance envelope. Jade nodded acceptance of the criteria without comment, her expression remaining as calm and focused as it had been throughout the morning's proceedings. The confidence she projected wasn't the manufactured bravado of someone hoping to get lucky, but the quiet certainty of someone who understood exactly what they were capable of accomplishing. The stage was set for a demonstration that would either validate or shatter the assumptions that had shaped the morning's confrontation. What none of the observers yet realized was that they were about to witness the emergence of capabilities that had been carefully concealed behind the unremarkable facade of routine military service. Master Sergeant Cruz positioned herself at the spotting scope while additional personnel continued arriving at Range 7. What had begun as a routine qualification exercise was now drawing spectators from across Fort Meridian, including several officers who had heard rumors of an extraordinary shooting demonstration about to take place. The growing audience added pressure to an already tense situation, but also ensured that whatever happened would be witnessed by enough people to become part of base legend. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell approached from the direction of the base headquarters, her presence indicating that news of the confrontation had reached command levels. As the officer responsible for all marksmanship training at Fort Meridian, Mitchell had a professional interest in any demonstration that might challenge established training protocols or reveal previously unknown capabilities. Among base personnel, Captain Torres, Mitchell said quietly, positioning herself where she could observe without interfering with range operations. I understand we have an unusual situation developing here. Torres nodded, maintaining his professional composure, while internally wrestling with the implications of having field-grade officers witness what might turn into either a triumph or a disaster. Yes, ma'am. Private Reeves has requested permission to demonstrate extended-range marksmanship capabilities. Master Sergeant Cruz is supervising all safety and technical aspects. Mitchell's eyes found Jade, who was now conducting final preparations on the Barrett rifle with the methodical precision of someone following well-rehearsed procedures. The lieutenant colonel had observed thousands of soldiers during her career, and something about Jade's bearing suggested military experience that extended beyond her documented service record. What's her background? Mitchell asked, though she suspected the answer would be incomplete. Supply specialist, single deployment, standard training record, Torres replied. But her weapon handling and technical knowledge suggest additional experience that isn't reflected in her personnel file. The diplomatic phrasing conveyed Torres's growing suspicion that they were dealing with someone whose actual qualifications exceeded their apparent assignment. Mitchell nodded understanding, recognizing the careful language that military professionals used when discussing personnel with potentially classified backgrounds. Meanwhile, Jade was conducting environmental assessments with equipment that Cruz had provided. She held an atmospheric measurement device steady while reading wind indicators at multiple distances downrange. Her systematic approach to data collection reflected training in the complex calculations required for extreme distance shooting. Current conditions, Jade announced to Cruz, are air temperature 68 degrees Fahrenheit, barometric pressure 24.89 inches, humidity 31%. Wind is variable from the southwest at 8 to 12 miles. per hour with gusts to 15. Range is 2,000 meters. Elevation difference approximately 50 feet down angle. The precision and completeness of her environmental report impressed everyone within hearing distance. Most soldiers qualified on basic rifle marksmanship never learned to account for atmospheric conditions beyond simple wind direction. The fact that Jade was automatically considering barometric pressure and humidity indicated training in advanced ballistic calculations. Crews verified the measurements with her own instruments, finding Jade's readings accurate within acceptable margins. More importantly, the systematic way Jade had gathered and reported the data demonstrated familiarity with sniper protocols that weren't taught in standard infantry training. Environmental data confirmed, crews announced formally. Conditions are suitable for precision shooting at extended range. Hawthorne watched the preparations with growing anxiety. Every aspect of Jade's performance suggested expertise that challenged his initial assessment of her capabilities. The technical knowledge she was displaying wasn't something that could be learned from books or casual observation. It reflected practical experience gained through extensive training and real-world application. Private Reeves, Hawthorne said, making one final attempt to assert his authority over the proceedings. I want to emphasize that at 2,000 meters, even a small error in calculation or technique will result in a complete miss. The target at that distance appears smaller than a pinhead to the naked eye. Are you certain you want to proceed? Jade looked up from the rifle's scope adjustment, meeting his eyes directly for the first time since their confrontation had begun. When she spoke, her voice carried quiet authority that made everyone present pay attention. Sergeant Hawthorne, she said calmly, I appreciate your concern for ammunition costs and range safety. However, I'm confident in my ability to place accurate shots at this distance under current conditions. The response was professionally respectful but carried unmistakable certainty. She wasn't boasting or trying to intimidate anyone. She was simply stating her assessment of her own capabilities with the kind of matter-of-fact confidence that experienced professionals brought to familiar tasks. Private Chun found himself holding his breath as he watched Jade settle into shooting position behind the Barrett rifle. Her body alignment was textbook perfect, with every aspect of her stance reflecting advanced training in precision shooting techniques. The casual way she adjusted the bipod legs and positioned herself behind the scope suggested someone who had performed the same actions thousands of times before. Spotter ready, crews announced, positioning herself at the high-powered spotting scope that would allow her to observe bullet impact and provide feedback on shot placement. The formal protocol added an official quality to the demonstration that emphasized its significance. Shooter ready, Jade replied, her voice carrying the ritual formality that accompanied precision shooting in military settings. She had settled into a completely motionless position, her breathing controlled and her focus entirely on the distant target that was barely visible as a speck against the mountainous backdrop. The silence that settled over Range 7 was profound. Nearly 40 people had gathered to witness the shot, including officers, enlisted personnel, and civilian contractors who had heard about the unusual demonstration. The crowd understood they were about to see either exceptional marksmanship or spectacular failure. With no middle ground possible at the distance being attempted, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell positioned herself where she could observe both Jade's shooting technique and the reactions of the assembled personnel. As an experienced officer, she understood that the implications of this demonstration extended far beyond a single soldier's marksmanship capabilities. If Jade succeeded in making an accurate shot, it would challenge assumptions about gender and military capability that were deeply embedded in institutional culture. Rodriguez leaned over to Chun and whispered, "Look at her breathing pattern. She's controlling her heart rate like someone who's done this under combat conditions." Chun nodded, noting the same physiological control that Rodriguez had observed. Jade's respiration was steady and controlled, with none of the irregular patterns that typically indicated stress or uncertainty. Her entire demeanor suggested someone who was completely comfortable with the weapon system and confident in their ability to achieve the desired result. Hawthorne found himself studying Jade's technique with professional interest, despite his personal investment in seeing her fail. Her body position was flawless, her scope adjustment systematic, and her trigger finger placement textbook perfect. Everything about her approach reflected advanced training that would typically require years of specialized instruction to develop. Range is clear. Shooter has control, Cruz announced, following safety protocols while acknowledging that Jade was ready to attempt the shot. The formal declaration created a moment of suspended anticipation as everyone present focused on the distant target that would determine the outcome of the morning's confrontation. Jade made final adjustments to the scope's elevation and windage settings, her movements precise and confident. She was calculating ballistic trajectory in real time, accounting for all the environmental variables that Hawthorne had described while making corrections that reflected practical experience with the weapon system under similar conditions. First shot, Jade announced quietly, indicating her readiness to fire. The formal warning gave spotters and observers time to prepare for the thunderous report that the Barrett rifle would generate. The moment stretched with the weight of multiple reputations and assumptions hanging in the balance. What happened next would either validate Hawthorne's assessment of gender limitations in precision shooting or demonstrate that capability could emerge from the most unexpected sources when circumstances required it. In the complete silence that preceded the shot, the only sounds were the whisper of wind across the mountain valley and the distant calls of birds who had no idea they were about to witness history being made at Fort Meridian's Range 7. The thunderous crack of the Barrett .50 caliber rifle shattered the mountain silence, the massive muzzle blast sending a shockwave across Range 7 that could be felt in the chests of observers standing 50 feet away. The recoil, generating over 10,000 foot-pounds of energy, would have knocked an inexperienced shooter completely off target. But Jade absorbed the impact with practiced technique that demonstrated years of experience managing the weapon's violent energy transfer. Master Sergeant Cruz immediately focused her spotting scope on the distant target area, scanning systematically for signs of bullet impact, while the sound of the shot echoed off the surrounding mountain peaks. The 2,000-meter distance meant that even at the bullet's velocity of nearly 3,000 feet per second, there would be a noticeable delay before impact became visible to observers. Impact, Cruz announced after what seemed like an eternity but was actually less than 3 seconds. Her voice carried a note of surprise that made everyone present lean forward in anticipation. Center target, approximately 4 inches high and 2 inches left of center. The silence that followed her announcement was absolute. 43 people stood motionless, processing what they had just witnessed. At 2,000 meters, with challenging wind conditions and atmospheric variables, Jade had placed her first shot within 6 inches of perfect center, a level of accuracy that even experienced snipers would consider exceptional under ideal conditions. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell felt her understanding of the situation shift completely. What she had initially assumed was either misguided confidence or elaborate bluffing had just been revealed as legitimate expertise of the highest caliber. The shot placement Cruz had described would have been impressive from someone with documented sniper training and years of experience. From a supply specialist with no apparent advanced marksmanship background, it was extraordinary. Private Chun grabbed Rodriguez's arm unconsciously, his excitement overriding military protocol. Did she just hit the target at 2,000 meters on her first shot? he whispered, his voice carrying disbelief and awe in equal measure. Rodriguez nodded slowly, equally stunned by what they had witnessed. "Not just hit it," he replied quietly. "She nearly centered it. That's the kind of shooting you see in sniper competitions, not routine qualification exercises." Hawthorne stood frozen, his confident expression replaced by something approaching shock. The shot he had proposed as an impossible challenge designed to humble an overconfident subordinate had just been executed with casual precision that exceeded his own capabilities. Every assumption he had made about gender limitations and natural advantages was crumbling in the face of undeniable evidence. "Outstanding shot placement," Cruz announced formally, her professional composure intact despite her obvious surprise at the results. "Private Reeves, that represents exceptionally accurate shooting under challenging conditions. Are you prepared to attempt additional shots to establish consistency?" The question was both a compliment and a challenge. A single accurate shot could potentially be attributed to luck, but consistent precision at extreme distance would definitively establish genuine expertise. Cruz was offering Jade the opportunity to prove that her first shot represented skill rather than chance. Jade remained in shooting position, her eyes still aligned with the scope as she processed the results of her initial shot. When she spoke, her voice carried the calm satisfaction of someone whose performance had met their own expectations rather than exceeded them. "Master Sergeant, I'd be happy to demonstrate consistency. The first shot confirms that my calculations were essentially correct, with minor adjustments needed for wind drift and elevation." She made subtle corrections to the scope's adjustment knobs, movements so small they were barely visible to observers, but reflecting the kind of precision that separated expert marksmen from merely competent shooters. The casual way she fine-tuned her equipment suggested someone who understood exactly how environmental conditions were affecting projectile flight. Captain Torres found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about personnel, assignments, and capability assessment. The woman making precision adjustments to a high-powered rifle system was supposedly a supply clerk whose primary responsibility involved managing inventory and processing requisitions. The contradiction between her documented role and demonstrated expertise was becoming impossible to ignore. "Second shot," Jade announced, settling back into perfect shooting position. Her breathing pattern returned to the controlled rhythm that indicated complete physiological preparation for precise shooting. Every aspect of her technique reflected training that typically required years of specialized instruction and extensive practice to develop. The second shot followed within 30 seconds of the first, the Barrett's thunderous report again echoing across the valley while Cruz maintained focus on the distant target area. The systematic timing suggested someone who understood the importance of maintaining consistent conditions between shots rather than rushing through the demonstration. "Impact. Dead center," Cruz reported, her voice carrying unmistakable admiration for the precision she was observing. "Perfect shot placement at 2,000 meters. A collective intake of breath rippled through the assembled observers as they processed the implications of consecutive precision shots at extreme distance. What they had just witnessed represented shooting capabilities that were typically associated with elite military snipers or competition marksmen with decades of experience. Corporal Stone, who had been subjected to Hawthorne's earlier condescension about female shooting capabilities, felt a surge of vindication mixed with amazement. The demonstration was providing definitive proof that gender had no bearing on marksmanship potential, delivered by someone who had allowed herself to be underestimated until circumstances required her to reveal her true capabilities. "Incredible," Private Matthews muttered, his earlier agreement with Hawthorne's gender-based assumptions now seeming embarrassingly naive. "She's shooting better than most people could manage at 500 meters. And she's doing it at 4 times that distance." Jade cycled the Barrett's action smoothly, ejecting the spent cartridge case and chambering a fresh round with mechanical precision that indicated intimate familiarity with the weapon system. Her movements were economical and confident, reflecting the kind of muscle memory that developed through extensive operational use rather than occasional training. "Third shot," she announced, maintaining the formal protocol while demonstrating that her previous accuracy hadn't been the result of luck or favorable conditions. The consistency of her performance was establishing a pattern that couldn't be dismissed as coincidental. "Lieutenant Colonel." Mitchell moved closer to the spotting position where she could observe both the shooting technique and the target results directly. As the senior officer present, she understood that what she was witnessing would require formal documentation and potentially significant changes to training protocols and personnel assessment procedures. The third shot produced the same thunderous report and perfect execution, with Jade again absorbing the massive recoil with practiced technique that demonstrated years of experience managing the Barrett system's violent energy transfer. Her shooting position remained stable throughout the firing sequence, indicating strength and training that contradicted assumptions about physical limitations. "Impact, center mass, 1 inch right of perfect center," Cruz announced, her spotting becoming a running commentary on an exhibition of marksmanship that was exceeding everyone's expectations. 3 consecutive shots within a 4-inch group at 2,000 meters under field conditions. The statistical significance of what they were observing was becoming undeniable. Professional snipers typically considered a 12-inch group acceptable at 2,000 meters, while 18-inch groups were considered satisfactory for most operational purposes. Jade was consistently placing shots within a 4-inch circle, demonstrating precision that exceeded military standards by a factor of 3 or 4. Hawthorne finally found his voice, though it carried none of the confident authority that had characterized his earlier pronouncements. "Private Reeves," he said carefully, "your shooting performance is exceptional. Can you explain where you acquired this level of training?" The question everyone had been thinking was finally asked directly, creating a moment of anticipation as observers waited to learn how a supply specialist had developed shooting skills that rivaled the best marksmen in the military. The contradiction between Jade's assigned role and demonstrated capabilities demanded explanation. Jade remained focused on her shooting position, making minor adjustments to account for changing wind conditions, while considering how much information she was willing to reveal about her background. When she finally responded, her words would begin to explain the mystery that had captivated everyone present. "Sergeant Hawthorne," she said quietly, "sometimes people's current assignments don't fully reflect their previous experience or training background." The diplomatic answer provided information without revealing specifics, suggesting a complex service history that wasn't captured in standard personnel documentation. Everyone present understood they were witnessing the emergence of capabilities that had been carefully concealed behind the unremarkable facade of routine. Military service. The atmosphere on Range 7 had transformed from routine training exercise to something resembling a formal investigation. Jade's diplomatic response about previous experience had only intensified the curiosity of everyone present, particularly the senior personnel who understood that exceptional marksmanship skills didn't develop without extensive specialized training and operational application. "Master." Sergeant Cruz lowered her spotting scope and approached Jade's shooting position with the measured steps of someone who had reached important conclusions about what she was witnessing. As a sniper instructor with 15 years of experience, Cruz had observed thousands of shooters and could distinguish between different levels of training based on technique, consistency, and the subtle indicators that revealed genuine expertise. "Private Reeves," Cruz said formally, positioning herself where she could observe both Jade's equipment handling and her responses to questions. Your shooting performance demonstrates training that typically requires years of specialized instruction. The consistency of your shot placement, your environmental assessment capabilities, and your weapon handling all indicate advanced sniper training. The statement was delivered as professional observation rather than accusation, but everyone present understood its implications. Advanced sniper training wasn't something that appeared in a soldier's background by accident. It required formal selection, extensive coursework, and operational application that would be thoroughly documented in military records. Jade continued making minor adjustments to her scope settings while considering how to respond to increasingly direct questions about her background. The precision shooting demonstration had served its purpose of challenging Hawthorne's assumptions about female marksmanship capabilities, but it had also revealed expertise that couldn't be easily explained within the context of her apparent assignment as a supply specialist. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell decided that the situation required command intervention. As the senior officer present, she had responsibility for ensuring that any personnel with undisclosed capabilities were properly identified and utilized according to their actual qualifications rather than their apparent assignments. Private Reeves, Mitchell said, her tone carrying the authority that came with field-grade rank, I'm directing you to provide a complete accounting of your military training background. Your demonstrated capabilities suggest qualifications that aren't reflected in your current assignment, and I need to understand the discrepancy. The direct order eliminated Jade's option of continuing to provide diplomatic non-answers about her experience. Military protocol required honest responses to direct questions from superior officers, particularly when those questions related to personnel qualifications and capabilities that might affect unit readiness and training. Effectiveness. Jade set the Barrett rifle to safe and turned to face Mitchell directly, her posture shifting to the formal attention position that indicated recognition of command authority. When she spoke, her voice carried the precise diction that soldiers use when providing official information to superior officers. Ma'am, Jade began carefully, my training background includes advanced marksmanship instruction through the Special Operations Sniper Course, Urban Precision Shooting Certification, and operational deployment as a designated marksman with classified special operations units. The formal revelation sent a wave of surprised murmurs through the assembled observers. The Special Operations Sniper Course was among the most difficult and selective training programs in the military, with graduation rates below 15% and requirements that eliminated most candidates before completion. Hawthorne felt his worldview continuing to crumble as the implications of Jade's statement became clear. The woman he had dismissed as someone who couldn't understand military culture was revealing credentials that exceeded his own training by several levels. Special Operations Sniper training represented the pinnacle of military marksmanship education. Special Operations background, Mitchell repeated, processing the information while considering its implications for base personnel assignments and training protocols. What was your operational specialty, and why aren't these qualifications reflected in your current assignment? The question addressed the fundamental contradiction that had been puzzling everyone since Jade's shooting demonstration began. Soldiers with special operations backgrounds and advanced marksmanship training weren't typically assigned to supply positions unless unusual circumstances were involved. Jade's response required careful consideration of security protocols and personal privacy boundaries. Special Operations service often involved classified missions and sensitive information that couldn't be discussed in open forums, even with superior officers who lacked appropriate clearances and need-to-know authorization. Ma'am, Jade replied, My previous service included multiple combat deployments in classified operations. My current assignment represents a voluntary transition to support roles following completion of my operational commitments. The explanation provided information while maintaining security protocols. But it raised additional questions about why someone with elite training would choose to work in a position that didn't utilize their specialized capabilities. Military personnel with sniper qualifications were typically in high demand for training, and operational assignments. Crews understood the implications better than most of the observers. Special operations snipers often experienced operational stress that required recovery time and transition periods before they could return to high-intensity assignments. The choice to work in a support role might represent healing and decompression rather than career limitation. How many operational deployments? Mitchell asked, pursuing information that would help her understand the scope of Jade's experience and the reasons for her current assignment preferences. 7 deployments over 6 years. Ma'am, Jade replied. Primarily in support of counter-terrorism operations in multiple theaters. The numbers were staggering. 7 deployments represented nearly continuous operational service with minimal time for recovery between missions. Most special operations personnel accumulated 3 or 4 deployments over similar timeframes, making Jade's service record exceptional in its intensity and duration. Private Chun found himself recalculating everything he thought he knew about military service and the relationship between assignments and capabilities. The quiet supply clerk who had been helping with routine administrative tasks was revealing a background that included more combat experience than most infantry soldiers accumulated in entire careers. Rodriguez leaned over to Matthews and whispered, 7 deployments in 6 years means she was basically living in combat zones. That's the kind of operational tempo that breaks most people. Matthews nodded, beginning to understand why someone with such extensive combat experience might choose the relative peace and predictability of supply work. The transition from constant operational stress to routine administrative duties might represent necessary recovery rather than career decline. Captain Torres was processing the personnel management implications of having an elite sniper working in supply without appropriate utilization of her capabilities. The demonstration had revealed not just individual talent, but a systemic failure to properly assess and assign personnel based on their actual qualifications. Private Reeves, Torres said, given your background and demonstrated capabilities, are you interested in transitioning to assignments that would better utilize your marksmanship training? We have instructor positions and advanced training programs that could benefit from your experience. The offer represented an opportunity to return to work that matched her qualifications. But Jade's response would need to balance personal recovery needs with professional obligations and the potential value of sharing her expertise with other soldiers. Sir, Jade replied carefully, I appreciate the consideration. My current assignment has provided valuable stability during a transition period. However, I would be willing to contribute to training programs in ways that support other soldiers' development while maintaining appropriate work-life balance. The diplomatic answer suggested openness to sharing her expertise while maintaining boundaries around operational assignments that might trigger stress responses or interfere with her recovery process. It was a mature approach that recognized both her capabilities and her personal needs. Hawthorne realized that he needed to address his earlier assumptions and the confrontational approach he had taken with someone whose qualifications far exceeded his own. The morning's events had provided a harsh lesson about the dangers of making judgments based on superficial indicators rather than taking time to understand people's actual backgrounds and capabilities. Private Reeves, Hawthorne said, his tone much more respectful than it had been during their initial confrontation. I owe you an apology. My earlier comments were based on assumptions that were clearly incorrect, and I failed to recognize your expertise and experience. The apology was professional and appropriate, acknowledging his errors without making excuses or attempting to minimize the disrespect he had shown. Everyone present recognized the significance of his staff. Sergeant publicly apologizing to a lower-ranking soldier for misjudgment and inappropriate behavior. Jade accepted the apology with the same grace she had shown throughout the morning's events. Thank you, Sergeant Hawthorne. Everyone makes assumptions based on available information. The important thing is learning from those experiences and adjusting our approaches accordingly. The generous response demonstrated maturity and professionalism that impressed everyone present, particularly the junior soldiers who were learning important lessons about leadership, respect, and the complexity of judging others based on limited information. As the formal shooting demonstration concluded and personnel began processing the implications of what they had witnessed, it became clear that the morning's events would have lasting effects on training protocols, personnel assessment procedures, and the base community's understanding of capability and expertise. The revelation of Jade's special operations background had fundamentally altered the dynamics on Range 7. But what happened next would transform the morning's events from a simple demonstration of marksmanship into something that would be discussed throughout the military community for years to come. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell was processing the personnel implications when her radio crackled with an urgent transmission that would test Jade's capabilities in ways no one had anticipated. Base operations to Range 7. We have an active situation developing that requires immediate sniper support, came the voice of Colonel Anderson, Fort Meridian's commanding officer. We have hostile activity at the north perimeter with confirmed sniper fire from an elevated position, approximately 3,200 meters from base facilities. The transmission sent a shockwave through everyone present. What had begun as a training exercise was suddenly becoming an operational emergency that threatened base security and personnel safety. Mitchell grabbed her radio immediately, understanding that the situation had moved far beyond routine training protocols. Range 7 to base operations, Mitchell responded. What's the tactical assessment and immediate requirements? We have 2 confirmed casualties from sniper fire, with the hostile shooter positioned on Ridge Point overlooking the vehicle maintenance area, Anderson replied. Local law enforcement is en route, but they lack the capability to engage targets at that distance. We need immediate counter-sniper response to neutralize the threat and prevent additional casualties. The geographical reference to Ridge Point sent a chill through everyone familiar with Fort Meridian's layout. The elevated position provided commanding views of multiple base facilities and would be extremely difficult to approach without exposing personnel to additional sniper fire. Standard infantry weapons lacked the range and precision necessary for effective response at that distance. Master Sergeant Cruz immediately began calculating distances and angles, her sniper instructor experience providing tactical assessment capabilities that would be crucial for planning any response. Ridge Point is approximately 3,200 meters from this position, she announced. It's within the theoretical maximum range of the Barrett system, but the shot would require accounting for significant elevation changes and wind conditions. The technical challenge was extraordinary. At 3,200 meters, environmental factors would affect projectile flight in ways that challenged even the most sophisticated ballistic calculations. Temperature variations at different elevations, wind shear effects, and the Coriolis force from Earth's rotation would all influence bullet trajectory in complex and difficult to predict ways. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell found herself facing a command decision that could determine whether additional casualties occurred. The base's designated sniper team was currently deployed on a training exercise 200 miles away, leaving no immediately available personnel with the specialized training necessary for extreme distance. Precision shooting under operational conditions. Private Reeves, Mitchell said, her voice carrying the weight of command authority in a crisis situation. Given your demonstrated capabilities and operational background, are you prepared to attempt counter-sniper engagement at 3,200 meters? The question was both a request for assistance and a test of Jade's willingness to transition from training demonstration to actual operational deployment. The shot would be attempted under combat conditions with lives hanging in the balance. Fundamentally different from the controlled environment of range qualification, Jade's response came without hesitation, her voice carrying the calm certainty that characterized her approach to precision shooting challenges. Yes, ma'am. I'm prepared to engage the hostile target. I'll need current atmospheric data for the target area and confirmation of civilian evacuation from potential impact zones. The immediate acceptance of the mission demonstrated the kind of operational mindset that separated combat veterans from training-focused personnel. While others were still processing the implications of the situation, Jade was already transitioning to mission planning and risk assessment procedures. Crews began coordinating with base operations to obtain real-time environmental data for the Ridge Point area, while Torres established communication protocols that would allow coordination between the shooting position and base command. The informal demonstration had suddenly become a formal military operation with all the associated requirements for command and control. Atmospheric conditions at Ridge Point, came the radio update from base weather station. Air temperature 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure 24.91 inches, humidity 28%. Wind is steady from the northwest at 15 miles per hour with gusts to 22. Elevation. Difference between Range 7 and Ridge Point is 847 feet. Jade began making calculations that would account for all the environmental variables affecting a 3,200-meter shot under operational conditions. The complexity of the ballistic problem exceeded anything typically attempted outside of specialized sniper competitions. But the urgency of the situation eliminated any option for extended preparation or multiple ranging shots. Captain Torres established direct communication with the Base Tactical Operations Center, ensuring that Jade would have real-time intelligence about target movement and civilian safety considerations. The coordination requirements reflected the transition from training exercise to combat operation. Target confirmation, came the radio report. Hostile snipers positioned behind concrete barriers at the north end of Ridge Point, approximately 3,200 meters from Range 7. Target has fired 6 rounds in the past 12 minutes, with confirmed hits on 2 personnel and multiple near misses on maintenance facility personnel. The tactical intelligence provided Jade with essential information about target behavior and defensive positioning, but it also confirmed that the hostile shooter was actively engaging base personnel and represented an immediate threat to additional casualties if not neutralized quickly. Hawthorne found himself in the surreal position of observing someone he had dismissed as unqualified preparing to attempt the most challenging precision shot any of them had ever witnessed. The psychological whiplash of moving from condescension to admiration to professional respect was making him question fundamental assumptions about capability assessment and leadership. Judgment. Private Reeves, Mitchell said formally. You are hereby authorized to engage the hostile target with whatever force is necessary to neutralize the threat. Rules of engagement are weapons-free for confirmed hostile personnel. The formal authorization transformed Jade's status from training participant to active combatant, carrying all the legal and tactical responsibilities associated with combat operations. Everyone present understood they were about to witness either successful mission completion or tragic failure with real-world consequences. Jade settled into shooting position with the Barrett rifle, her movements reflecting the kind of practiced efficiency that came from years of operational experience under similar high-stress conditions. The casual confidence she had shown during the morning's demonstration was now focused into the intense concentration required for precision shooting when lives hung in the balance. "Spotter, ready for combat engagement," Cruz announced, positioning herself at the spotting scope with the kind of professional focus that characterized combat veterans transitioning from training to operational mindset. "Shooter ready." "Requesting final target confirmation and clearance to engage," Jade replied, following combat protocols while conducting final equipment checks and ballistic calculations for the most challenging shot any of them had ever attempted. Moments stretched with the weight of multiple lives depending on precision shooting, capabilities that would test the absolute limits of human skill, advanced equipment, and environmental conditions. What happened next would determine not just the success of the immediate mission, but the future trajectory of everyone present who was about to witness either triumph or tragedy played out at impossible distances. The transition from training demonstration to combat operation was complete, with Jade preparing to attempt a precision shot that would either validate her exceptional capabilities under the ultimate test of operational pressure, or reveal the limitations that even elite training couldn't overcome when circumstances demanded perfection. The sound of the Barrett .50 caliber rifle firing at maximum combat engagement distance was unlike anything the assembled personnel had experienced during training exercises. The thunderous crack echoed off the mountain faces with a finality that indicated real bullets traveling toward a real target under conditions where failure meant continued threat to American lives. The massive muzzle blast sent dust and debris swirling across Range 7 as 43 people held their breath waiting for confirmation of impact. At 3,200 meters, Master Sergeant Cruz maintained steady focus through her spotting scope, tracking the bullet's flight path while calculating the time of flight for a projectile traveling over 2 miles to reach its intended target. At that distance, even the .50 caliber round's velocity of 2,900 feet per second meant nearly 4 seconds of flight time, during which wind conditions, temperature variations, and atmospheric pressure could affect trajectory in unpredictable ways. "Impact confirmed," Cruz announced, her voice carrying professional satisfaction mixed with amazement at what she had just observed. "Direct hit on hostile position. Target is down and no longer a threat to base personnel." The confirmation of successful engagement at 3,200 meters sent a wave of relief through everyone present, followed immediately by stunned recognition of what they had just witnessed. Jade had successfully neutralized an active sniper threat at a distance that challenged the theoretical limits of precision shooting, accomplishing under combat pressure what most marksmen couldn't achieve under perfect training conditions. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell immediately grabbed her radio to confirm mission success with base operations. "Range 7 to base command. Hostile sniper threat has been neutralized by precision engagement. Recommend immediate tactical team deployment to Ridge Point for target confirmation and area security." "Copy, Range 7, came the reply from Colonel Anderson. "Outstanding work. Tactical team is en route to Ridge Point for post-engagement assessment. Medical personnel report no additional casualties since the threat was neutralized." The formal mission completion confirmation transformed the atmosphere on Range 7 from tense anticipation to something approaching celebration. Personnel who had gathered to witness a marksmanship demonstration had instead observed the successful resolution of an active threat that had endangered base security and personnel safety. Private Chun found himself staring at Jade with something approaching awe as she began conducting post-engagement equipment procedures with the same methodical precision she had shown throughout the morning. The casual competence with which she had transitioned from training exercise to combat operation was unlike anything he had experienced during his military service. She just made a successful sniper kill at over 2 miles. Chun whispered to Rodriguez, his voice carrying disbelief despite having witnessed the engagement personally. That's the kind of shooting that gets written about in military history books. Rodriguez nodded, equally impressed by both the technical achievement and the psychological composure that Jade had displayed under ultimate pressure. Look at her conducting post-mission procedures. She's treating it like routine business, not like she just accomplished something that maybe 50 people in the world could do under those conditions. The observation was accurate. Jade was systematically securing the Barrett rifle, documenting ammunition expenditure, and completing safety checks with the kind of professional routine that suggested similar engagements were familiar rather than exceptional experiences. Her operational background was becoming increasingly evident through actions rather than explanations. Captain Torres approached Jade as she completed her post-engagement procedures, his expression reflecting both professional respect and curiosity about the capabilities he had just witnessed. "Private Reeves," he said formally, "that was exceptional shooting under combat conditions. Your performance potentially saved multiple lives today." Jade looked up from her equipment documentation, meeting Torres's eyes with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout the crisis. "Thank you, sir. I'm glad we could resolve the situation without additional casualties." The modest response was characteristic of her approach to recognition, deflecting personal credit while acknowledging the successful mission outcome. Professional soldiers typically displayed similar attitudes toward individual achievement within team contexts, but her complete lack of excitement about accomplishing an extraordinary feat suggested extensive experience with high-stress operations. Staff Sergeant Hawthorne found himself in the psychologically complex position of witnessing someone he had initially dismissed demonstrate capabilities that exceeded his own training and experience by several orders of magnitude. The morning's events had provided harsh lessons about assumption-making, capability assessment, and the relationship between apparent assignments and actual qualifications. "Private Reeves," Hawthorne said, approaching with obvious respect, "I need to acknowledge that everything I thought I understood about marksmanship and military capability has been challenged by what I've witnessed today. Your performance under both training and combat conditions represents expertise I've never seen before." The public acknowledgement from someone who had begun the day by questioning her basic military knowledge was significant, but Jade received it with the same grace she had shown throughout their interactions. "Thank you, Sergeant Hawthorne. Today provided good opportunities for everyone to learn something new about capabilities and assumptions." Master Sergeant Cruz completed her post-engagement documentation while processing the implications of what she had observed. As a sniper instructor with 15 years of experience, she understood that Jade's successful engagement at 3,200 meters under combat conditions represented shooting that belonged in the uppermost tier of recorded military marksmanship achievements. "Private Reeves," Cruz said, her tone carrying professional admiration. "In 15 years of sniper instruction, I've never seen shooting that approaches what you demonstrated today. The precision you maintained under both training and operational pressure suggests capabilities that need to be properly recognized and utilized." The assessment from someone with Cruz's background and experience carried significant weight. Her evaluation of Jade's performance would become part of formal documentation that might influence future training protocols and personnel assignment decisions throughout The military marksmanship community. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell was already considering the broader implications of having discovered someone with such exceptional capabilities working in an assignment that didn't utilize their specialized training. The morning's events had revealed not just individual talent, but systemic issues with personnel assessment and capability recognition that needed immediate attention. Private Reeves, Mitchell said, based on your demonstrated capabilities and operational background, I'm recommending you for immediate consideration for advanced instructor positions and specialized training program development. Your expertise represents resources that the military community needs to access and utilize effectively. The formal recognition represented an opportunity to transition from anonymous support work to positions that would match her qualifications and provide appropriate utilization of her specialized training. But Jade's response would need to balance professional opportunities with personal recovery needs and work-life balance considerations. Ma'am, I appreciate the recognition and would be interested in contributing to training programs that help other soldiers develop their capabilities, Jade replied carefully. I'd prefer assignments that allow sharing knowledge and experience without returning to the operational tempo that characterized my previous. The diplomatic answer indicated openness to appropriate utilization of her expertise while maintaining boundaries around high-stress operational assignments. It was a mature approach that recognized both professional obligations and personal limitations that needed to be respected during transition periods. As news of the successful engagement spread throughout Fort Meridian, personnel from across the base began arriving to learn more about the extraordinary marksmanship demonstration that had evolved into successful resolution of an active threat. The morning's events were becoming legend even before official documentation was completed. The transformation of Jade's status from anonymous supply clerk to recognized expert had been dramatic and public, witnessed by enough people to ensure that her capabilities would be properly acknowledged and utilized going forward. But more importantly, the morning had provided valuable lessons about capability recognition, assumption making, and the importance of treating all personnel with appropriate professional respect regardless of their apparent assignments. The circle of revelation was complete, but the implications would continue unfolding as the military community processed the lessons learned about hidden expertise, gender assumptions, and the complex relationships between documented qualifications and actual capabilities that existed within their ranks. The hour following Jade's successful engagement brought a steady stream of personnel to Range 7, creating an informal gathering that resembled a post-mission debriefing more than the conclusion of a routine training exercise. Word of the extraordinary marksmanship demonstration and subsequent combat engagement had spread throughout Fort Meridian with the speed that only military communities could achieve, drawing curious observers from every corner of the base. Staff Sergeant Hawthorne found himself in the uncomfortable but necessary position of publicly acknowledging the complete reversal of his earlier assessments. The morning had begun with his confident assertions about gender limitations in precision shooting, and had concluded with witnessing capabilities that exceeded his own training by several orders of magnitude. The psychological adjustment required was substantial, but professionally essential. Private Reeves, Hawthorne said, approaching Jade as she completed final equipment documentation. I want to offer a formal and complete apology for my behavior and assumptions this morning. Everything I said about natural advantages and gender limitations has been definitively proven wrong by your performance. He paused, clearly struggling with the implications of his misjudgment. More importantly, I failed to treat a fellow soldier with the respect that everyone deserves, regardless of their apparent assignment or background. That failure reflects poorly on my leadership and my understanding of military values. Apology was comprehensive and public, delivered in front of enough witnesses to ensure that Hawthorne's acknowledgement of error would be as widely known as his original condescending comments. Several junior soldiers observed the exchange with obvious interest, recognizing the professional courage required for a senior non-commissioned officer to admit such fundamental mistakes. Jade received the apology with characteristic grace, her response reflecting both professionalism and understanding of the learning process that all military personnel experienced when confronted with new information that challenged existing assumptions. "Thank you, Sergeant Hawthorne," she replied. "This morning provided learning opportunities for everyone present. The important thing is using those experiences to improve our approach to capability assessment and professional relationships going forward." Private Chen, who had observed the entire progression from initial confrontation to final resolution, approached with obvious admiration, mixed with curiosity, about the broader implications of what he had witnessed. "Private Reeves," Chen said respectfully, "watching your performance today has changed how I think about military service and capability assessment. Can I ask what advice you'd give to soldiers who want to avoid making the same kinds of assumptions that led to this morning's misunderstandings?" The question reflected genuine interest in learning from the day's events, and Jade's response would provide guidance that could benefit junior soldiers throughout their careers. "The most important lesson," Jade replied thoughtfully, "is that people's current assignments don't necessarily reflect the full scope of their backgrounds or capabilities. Taking time to understand someone's actual experience and qualifications before making judgments about their competence will usually lead to better professional relationships and more effective teamwork." She paused, considering additional insights that might prove valuable. "Also, assumptions based on gender, age, or apparent rank can prevent us from recognizing expertise that could benefit our units and missions. The military is stronger when we accurately assess and utilize everyone's actual capabilities." Corporal Stone, who had been subjected to similar condescension earlier in the morning, nodded enthusiastically. The demonstration had provided definitive proof that gender-based assumptions about military capability were not just incorrect but professionally counterproductive. "Private Reeves," Stone said, "your performance today will be remembered by every female soldier who heard about it. You've proven that capability has nothing to do with gender and everything to do with training, experience, and dedication." Master Sergeant Cruz, who had been documenting the technical aspects of Jade's shooting performance, completed her official report while processing the broader implications for military, training, and personnel development programs. "Private Reeves," Cruz announced, "your shooting performance today represents some of the finest precision marksmanship I've observed in 15 years of sniper instruction. The consistency you maintained under both training and combat conditions suggests capabilities that need to be formally recognized and utilized." She held up the documentation she had been completing. "I'm recommending you for immediate consideration for advanced instructor positions, specialized training program development, and formal recognition for exceptional marksmanship achievement under combat conditions." The formal recommendations represented opportunities for Jade to transition into assignments that would properly utilize her expertise while contributing to the development of other military personnel. But they also indicated recognition at levels that would fundamentally change her status within the military community. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell approached the group as informal conversations were concluding, carrying official documentation that would formalize many of the changes that had emerged from the morning's events. "Private Reeves," Mitchell announced, "based on your demonstrated capabilities and successful resolution of today's operational emergency, I'm authorizing immediate promotion review and assignment consideration for positions that match your actual qualifications." She paused to address the broader group that had gathered around their discussion. "Additionally, today's events have highlighted the need for improved personnel assessment procedures and capability recognition protocols. We clearly have soldiers with exceptional qualifications working in assignments that don't utilize their expertise effectively." The administrative acknowledgement represented systemic changes that would extend beyond Jade's individual situation, potentially affecting how the military community assessed and assigned personnel with specialized backgrounds or undocumented capabilities. Captain Torres joined the discussion with information about immediate assignment opportunities that had become available as word of Jade's performance reached higher command levels. Private Reeves, Torres said, "I've received inquiries from 3 different training commands requesting your consideration for instructor positions. The Advanced Marksmanship School, the Special Operations Training Center, and the Combat Applications Group all have openings for personnel with your background and demonstrated capabilities." The range of opportunities reflected the military community's recognition that exceptional expertise needed to be properly utilized rather than allowed to remain hidden in routine assignments. But the offers also represented decisions about work-life balance and operational tempo that Jade would need to consider carefully. Rodriguez, who had observed the entire day's progression with fascination, raised a question that many present were considering. Private Reeves, Rodriguez said, "If you don't mind me asking, how many other soldiers do you think are working in assignments that don't reflect their actual capabilities? Today's events suggest that our personnel assessment systems might be missing significant expertise." The question addressed broader implications that extended beyond individual recognition to systemic issues with capability identification and utilization throughout the military community. Jade considered the question carefully before responding. "I think most people end up in assignments that generally match their documented qualifications," she replied diplomatically. "But transition periods, security clearance issues, personal circumstances, and recovery from operational stress can all create situations where someone's current assignment doesn't fully utilize their background or training." The response suggested that Jade's situation might not be unique, indicating potential for additional personnel with undocumented or underutilized capabilities working throughout military installations in assignments that didn't reflect their actual expertise. As the informal gathering began dispersing and personnel returned to their normal duties, the implications of the morning's events continued to resonate throughout Fort Meridian. What had begun as a routine qualification exercise had evolved into a comprehensive challenge to assumptions about capability assessment, gender limitations, and the relationship between assignments and expertise. The transformation of Jade's status from anonymous supply clerk to recognized expert had been dramatic and public, but more importantly, it had provided valuable lessons for everyone present about professional respect, capability recognition, and the importance of avoiding judgments based on superficial indicators rather than actual performance and qualifications. The morning had concluded with new understanding, mutual respect, and recognition that expertise could emerge from unexpected sources when circumstances required capabilities that had been carefully hidden behind unremarkable facades of routine military service. The weeks following the extraordinary events at Range 7 brought changes to Fort Meridian that extended far beyond Jade's individual circumstances. Her successful demonstration of precision marksmanship under both controlled and combat conditions had triggered comprehensive reviews of personnel assessment procedures, training protocols, and capability recognition systems throughout the installation. Master Sergeant Cruz found herself leading a newly established advanced marksmanship assessment program designed to identify personnel with undocumented shooting expertise. The program was based directly on lessons learned from Jade's case, recognizing that traditional qualification records might not capture the full scope of capabilities available within military units. "We've identified 12 soldiers in the past 3 weeks who demonstrate shooting capabilities significantly beyond their documented training records," Cruz reported during a briefing to base leadership. "Most are personnel with previous military experience who transitioned to different career fields, but their marksmanship skills remained at advanced levels." The systematic discovery of hidden expertise validated concerns that had emerged from Jade's case about the efficiency of personnel utilization throughout the forted military community. The implications extended beyond individual recognition to questions about how effectively the armed forces were identifying and employing their human resources. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell had assumed responsibility for developing new protocols that would ensure personnel with specialized capabilities were properly identified and offered appropriate assignment opportunities. The changes were being coordinated with higher command levels as potential models for implementation throughout the military system. The Reeves case, as it had become known in official documentation, highlighted systemic gaps in our ability to recognize and utilize exceptional capabilities that don't fit standard career progression patterns. Mitchell explained during a video conference with regional command authorities. Jade herself had accepted a position as senior marksmanship instructor at Fort Meridian's Advanced Training Center, a role that utilized her expertise while maintaining the work-life balance she required for continued recovery from her intensive operational service. The assignment allowed her to share her knowledge with developing soldiers while avoiding the high-stress tempo that characterized active-duty special operations. Her first formal class included 15 students, including Private Chen and several other personnel who had witnessed her extraordinary shooting demonstration. The curriculum she developed integrated technical marksmanship skills with lessons about capability recognition, professional respect, and the importance of avoiding assumptions based on superficial indicators. Precision shooting, Jade explained to her students during their initial session, requires mastery of technical skills, but it also demands mental discipline and emotional control that apply to many aspects of military service. Today we'll work on fundamentals that will improve your shooting while developing broader capabilities that will serve you throughout your careers. Staff Sergeant Hawthorne had requested permission to attend Jade's Pindavet instructional sessions, seeking both technical knowledge and opportunities to demonstrate the professional growth that had resulted from his experiences during the Range 7 incident. His presence in the classes served as a visible reminder of the learning process that all military personnel experienced when confronted with new information. Private Reeves. Instructor Reeves. Hawthorne corrected himself. During one of the early sessions, I wanted to thank you again for the patience you've shown while I've adjusted my understanding of capability assessment and leadership responsibilities. His continued acknowledgement of previous errors, while sometimes awkward, demonstrated genuine commitment to personal and professional development that impressed both students and fellow instructors. The transformation of their relationship had become a case study in how conflicts based on misunderstanding could evolve into mutual respect and learning opportunities. Private Chen, now serving as an unofficial teaching assistant in Jade's advanced courses, had developed into one of the program's most promising students. His enthusiasm for learning and natural ability to help other soldiers understand complex concepts had earned recognition from instructors throughout the training center. Instructor Reeves. Chen said during a break between shooting sessions, I've been thinking about how different my places, military experience, might have been if I'd understood from the beginning that expertise comes in many forms and isn't always immediately obvious. The observation reflected the broader impact that Jade's story had on developing soldiers' understanding of professional relationships and capability recognition. Her influence extended beyond technical marksmanship instruction to fundamental lessons about respect, assumption making, and the importance of treating all personnel as potential sources of valuable knowledge and experience. Corporal Stone had been selected for advanced marksmanship training based on performance improvements that began immediately after witnessing Jade's demonstration. The inspiration of seeing someone overcome gender-based assumptions through exceptional performance had motivated Stone to pursue shooting excellence with renewed determination. Having a female instructor who's proven that capability has nothing to do with gender makes every training session more meaningful, Stone explained to her fellow students. Instructor Reeves doesn't just teach shooting techniques. She demonstrates what's possible when talent meets opportunity and proper training. The ripple effects of representation and role modeling were becoming evident throughout the base community as female personnel pursued advanced training opportunities with increased confidence, and male personnel showed greater openness to recognizing expertise regardless of its source. Rodriguez had applied for transfer to the Advanced Training Center, hoping to work with Jade in developing curriculum that would help other soldiers avoid the assumption-making mistakes that had characterized the Range 7 incident. His request had been approved, and he was contributing to research on bias recognition and capability assessment that might benefit military communities beyond Fort Meridian. What we learned from the Reeves case, Rodriguez explained during a training development meeting, is that our initial judgments about people's capabilities are often influenced by factors that have nothing to do with their actual knowledge, skills, or potential. We need systematic approaches to capability assessment that focus on performance rather than assumptions. Captain Torres had been promoted to major and assigned to lead the Regional Marksmanship Excellence Program, a new initiative that would implement lessons learned from Fort Meridian's experience throughout multiple installations. His first-hand observation of Jade's extraordinary performance had positioned him as a subject matter expert on capability recognition and advanced training program development. The most important lesson from the Reeves case, Torres explained to audiences at military education conferences, is that exceptional capabilities can exist within our ranks without being immediately obvious. We need systems and attitudes that encourage people to demonstrate their full potential rather than limiting themselves based on others' expectations. As autumn arrived at Fort Meridian, the Advanced Training Center had become a destination for personnel from throughout the region, seeking instruction that went beyond basic marksmanship to include lessons about leadership, capability recognition, and professional development. Jade's reputation had attracted students and observers from across the military community. The quiet supply clerk, who had endured condescending comments about women's shooting capabilities, had evolved into a respected instructor whose influence extended far beyond technical skill development. Her story had become a catalyst for broader conversations about assumption-making, bias recognition, and the importance of creating environments where all personnel could demonstrate their actual capabilities. During evening reflection periods, Jade often walked the same mountain paths that surrounded Fort Meridian, considering the unexpected direction her life had taken since that morning at Range 7. The transition from anonymous support worker to recognized expert had been dramatic, but more importantly, it had provided opportunities to contribute to positive changes in military culture and training approaches. The healing that had begun with her choice to work in a low-profile assignment had continued through the meaningful connections and purposeful work that characterized her new role. Teaching and mentoring other soldiers had proven to be not just professionally fulfilling but personally therapeutic, providing structure and meaning that supported her ongoing recovery from the intensive operational service that had defined her earlier career. The transformation was complete, but the impact continued expanding as personnel throughout the military community processed the lessons learned about capability recognition, professional respect, and the importance of looking beyond superficial indicators to understand people's actual potential and expertise. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.